When it comes to web app and API security, the choice is simple. You can choose Fastly's security solution that teams will actually use in full blocking mode, just like 90% of their customers. Or you can stick with costly options that you probably just turn off. You can get Fastly's all-in-one platform that protects apps everywhere they live, however they're built. Or departments can agree to disagree. You can go to securityweekly.com/Fastly to learn more. Or you can just wish you had. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. If you want to stay in the loop, all things Security Weekly, please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe via your favorite podcast catcher or to our YouTube channel, sign up for our mailing list, join the Discord server, and follow us at our newest live streaming platform. That's right, we're on Twitch. Also, if you have a specific topic or guest you'd like us to cover on the shows, please visit securityweekly.com/guests. We review those on a regular basis and always want to hear from our audience as to who you'd like to have on our shows. Congressman Jim Langevin is a senior member of the House Armed Services Committee, where he is the chairman of the Subcommittee on Cyber, Innovative Technology, Information Systems, and also serves on subcommittees on sea power and projection forces and strategic forces. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
It's nice to have you here. I want to thank you for your services and all you've done to promote cybersecurity.
Thank you. Thank you. It's become a passion over the more than a decade or so that I've been doing this. We made some progress. I'd like to see more, but it's a work in progress.
Congressman, what drew you to specifically cybersecurity?
Well, I kind of fell into it. I don't necessarily have a technical background. I'm more of a policy wonk, and I was chairing a subcommittee on the Homeland Security Committee that had jurisdiction over cyber. The name of it was Emerging Threats, Cybersecurity, and Science and Technology. So I really thought that most of the time we would be looking at chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear threats to the country. And it wasn't until my staff director came to me one afternoon telling me that I really needed to get a classified briefing from these two scientists from Idaho National Labs that found a significant cyber vulnerability that could cause physical damage. That's when kind of the alarm bells went off. And I got the brief, and I saw what was now known as the Aurora threat that showed how inserting some malware into the generator's logic control system.
Did you brief with Mike? Was Mike one of the folks you briefed with?
What's that?
Was Mike one of the folks you briefed with?
Mike Asante,
yeah.
And who sadly not long ago passed away, and it's a great loss to the world. He was a great guy and really a knowledgeable researcher, and I was lucky that our paths crossed, and he was the one that helped put me on this path. But it really it awoke in me and showed me how, again, physical damage could be done through a cyber attack. But then we did a deeper dive to see how prepared we were, and found that we were really not prepared at all, and that we needed there was a lot of work that needed to be done to better protect the country in cyberspace. And it's been a work in progress ever since, and several projects that I've been involved with have been extremely meaningful, impactful, including most recently the Cyberspace Solarium Commission, where I was one of 14 commissioners, one of 4 members of Congress that were on the commission that we helped to create, and met for about a year, and then we issued our report with 80 recommendations. 55 of those were turned into legislative proposals, and we were able to successfully get 27 proposals through the National Defense Authorization Act were enacted into law, and are making significant progress toward better protecting us in cyberspace, including creating the first ever national cyber director, which I've been trying to do for more than a decade now, and it's finally got it across the finish line just at the end of last year.
Fantastic. With the recent attacks, especially on the Florida water system, of course, we cover industrial control systems attacks all the time. Do some of the new legislation specifically address industrial control system cybersecurity here in the U.S.?
So that's what we're hoping a new executive order will do coming down the pike. I would say that it will allow for CISA to be more proactive, and that the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency to be more proactive. But they're obviously the point agency dealing with private sector. And this is the challenge, right? That, where most of the damage can be done. This is what I found in my work more than a decade ago on the Homeland Security Committee, was that most of the damage will be done in critical infrastructure, chemical, in our electric grid, maybe our financial system, our telecommunications system, water, sewage treatment plants. But that's mainly owned and operated by the private sector, and government really doesn't have a whole lot of control per se over those entities. And so, although CISA has broad authorities and in terms of protecting the .gov network, it's going to be a partnership between government and the private sector to better protect us in cyberspace, including dealing with industrial control systems. What the change in the law we were able to get through in this last Congress was to be able to create a joint cyber planning office at CISA, which will help to anticipate these types of problems, and then within, say, industrial control systems, and then work more closely to address those. It also clarifies roles between the sector risk management agencies and CISA. So the left hand knows what the right hand is doing, and we have kind of closing the gap between who's doing what.
Is it? Do you believe there's legislation that could help improve? I hate to have legislation dictate things, but this is our critical infrastructure here in the U.S. Do you believe there's legislation that could be passed to allow them to could be compliant with certain regulations?
Well, sure, and that's part where you're getting where the sector risk management agencies come in. Sometimes they have regulatory authority. Others, in other areas, it may take legislation needing to be passed that will impose more requirements to make the industrial control systems more secure.
Lee.
So you mentioned that the operators are private companies; they're not government entities, which is cool. But how are they with the idea of getting CISA involved and partnering? And are they on board? Are they resistant? I wouldn't say they'd be looking for more regulation. Nobody is, but it could really work well.
They want that partnership with the government, as government wants the partnership with the private sector. In fact, one of the commissioners was on the Cyberspace OM Commission is Tom Fanning. The commission is still, by the way, in force. We got an extension on our work, but Tom Fanning, who's the chairman and CEO of Southern Company, was incredibly just invaluable as a resource to Solarium and putting forth industry's perspective. And one of the things that he was very passionate about and helped to shape one of our findings is a recommendation to create what's called a joint collaborative environment. So there's basically would create a new social contract between government and the private sector to allow more robust information sharing and intelligence sharing, so that basically Intel world has more insight into the threats that private sector critical infrastructure is facing, and critical infrastructure would get more real-time intelligence information to know where the threats are coming from or what the challenges they're facing. Right now we're basically passing emails back and forth in terms of intel sharing. Tom Fanning points out that we need something that's much more robust. So we almost got that recommendation through in this last Congress. It's going to be one of the things that I'll be working on in this Congress to create this, again, joint collaborative environment. It'll create a new social contract where government is going to have to share more robust intelligence information with private sector critical infrastructure. But private sector is also going to have to give more information to the government in terms of things like incident response, data breaches, and things of that nature.
What do you think the biggest challenge on that is, aside from getting the legislation through? Once we're going to execute, where's our big, where's the sell job got to be to get everybody on board?
Yeah, I think that most entities are there. It's going to be sort of a paradigm change for the intelligence community, and that they're going to be working more closely with cleared entities in private sector critical infrastructure. So, the Intel world it's always they deal in the realm of highly classified information. So it's versus need to share, and in this case, we're going to have the the intelligence community sharing more real-time information with private sector critical infrastructure. But I believe that we're going to get there. It's going to be this new social contract that will create this environment that will allow this more robust information sharing, better going back and forth, and it's to everyone's benefit.
Do you think that starts to push down like they did with law enforcement after 9/11? They started putting up fusion centers and things like that were focused real heavily on sort of kinetic stuff. But do you think there could be more push to support those entities at local levels with information, with incident response, and all these kind of things from federal?
Yeah, that's right, and that's the idea that we're going to anticipate and identify problems before they actually happen. If the intelligence community may be looking at something that to them maybe looks innocuous, or they wouldn't necessarily understand the impact of it, but if someone in the critical infrastructure saw that same information, would say, wow, that's a real problem. If they were to attack this particular node or this particular entity, it would have a broader impact. It's not just maybe a one-off, but could be something that's affecting critical infrastructure more broadly. So that's why that info sharing is just so important. So it's really the CISA is the future for CISA is to, of course, be in the field. That's where they want to make sure that that CISA is getting not necessarily just out of Washington, but really into the across the country to be in working more closely with entities across the cities and towns, and again more broadly in the country on these things.
Congressman, I guess for the benefit of our audience, how was CISA created, and exactly what is its mission today?
What is what?
CISA.
Yeah, so the CISA is the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency within the Department of Homeland Security. That's the primary agency that is responsible for protecting the .gov network. But it's also the primary entity is the point agency that deals with the private sector. So again, government doesn't control the .com world, or isn't responsible for per se defending it. It's a partner. They will be the entity that, say, private sector critical infrastructure would go to, either the Sector Risk Management Agency or to CISA in particular if there's a problem. And CISA then can call on either its own capabilities, or they have reached back to other areas of the federal government, like that would offer defense support to civil authorities, and could call in, say, resources from U.S. Cyber Command or NSA if they needed additional backup and support. The one challenge is right now that CISA needs to grow its own inherent capabilities. Right now, they're relying too heavily on defense support to civil authorities, but CISA needs to really develop its own expertise, and they can be a more effective resource to the private sector that way.
Yeah, I found it really interesting with CISA in its ability to bring in those other agencies to protect things such as the election, and really bring together all those different areas of expertise to protect our infrastructure.
That's right. And so that's a great example of how CISA was working with the private sector, or with local governments and states, municipalities, to better secure our elections. And I think Chris Krebs did an outstanding job in that role, and he brought all the tools to bear that could be brought to bear to protect the critical infrastructure of our election systems. And as a result, as he said, we had the most secure elections in U.S. history. So, but that's a great example of CISA working with either local or state governments or with the private sector to achieve a goal of stronger cybersecurity.
Lee?
So, I mean, I just was thinking, CISA's been really kicking butt and taking names, if you prefer, if you will forgive the analogy, on partnerships. They've really done an outstanding job, and I'm wondering if you see that any trouble with that moving forward. And the other thing I was thinking about at the same time is we got these relationships we're building. We're going to be working between CISA and private operators. Is there going to be any funding available for the private operators to implement cyber defenses? Because some of them are on a really tight budget.
Yeah, so I certainly would like to create grant programs where it's appropriate, where CISA could be, more effective in working with private sector, or especially states and municipalities could take advantage of federal resources. One of the things I'm trying to do is create a fund for IT modernization for states and municipalities to take advantage of. We tried it in a couple attempts in the COVID aid bills that we put through, that we wanted to put through funds for private sector critical infrastructure, and we weren't able to do as much as I would like. But if you look at states and municipalities, they've unfortunately got antiquated IT infrastructure, hard to defend, hard to upgrade, and we need to see that infrastructure modernized and incentivize moving data to the cloud. So we let the cloud service providers do what they do best. Let them worry about the security and the housing the data, if you will. And that way, states aren't trying to defend against nation state attacks, if you will, or the hackers that might come in and try to disrupt their operations. It's best if we can leave the security to the experts, and that way states can do what they do best, and that's providing services to their constituents.
I agree, and I just read an independent report, and it was a per capita analysis of data that Kansas and Rhode Island were among the two highest states in terms of unemployment fraud that occurred, especially during times of COVID. And you have these states, Congressman, they're trying to solve the same problem. And having, I think, federal assistance to allow them to do that securely is really one of the right approaches to all of this, right? All states are trying to do the same thing. They all have to process unemployment claims, for example. That's
right. And that's why we wanted to create this IT modernization fund. That's one of the findings in the Solarium Commission, that they wanted to create the National Cybersecurity Assistance Fund, and that would also help other areas of local and state government and even private sector hopefully tap into that fund for IT modernization and stronger cybersecurity.
Doug, I know you had more questions for the Congressman.
Yeah. So I think in those same lights, I mean, the biggest threats, I think, to a lot of these things come from without. They cross borders. They go all over the world. I was wondering, are we working to try to develop more cooperation with other countries so that we can prosecute people, we can get people who are doing things that are not within our jurisdiction? I mean, I've seen some of these things with Europol and things like that, but I just wondered how we're sort of refocusing on that.
Yes. So we are working with partners and allies, and we need to continue to do that because it's not just a U.S. problem or challenge. It's an international challenge or problem for us. And we're stronger together. If we try to do this in silos, we're already going to be extremely stressed and challenged to try to do this on our own. We need to work with partners and allies. That's one of the reasons why having a State Department lead, that's one of the findings of the Solarium Commission, was to create a ambassador level position with a bureau underneath that individual to support international diplomacy and cyber, and working closely with international partners on the law enforcement side to identify those entities that are violating norms of behavior, that are conducting criminal activity, and that's incredibly important that we leverage all assets of national power to go after those entities that are trying to cause us harm. So, the perfect example is the sanctions that were put on Russia just recently, and they were identified in SolarWinds and as the entity that was carried out one of the worst cyber intrusions in U.S. history, and as a result, they were sanctioned for it. So we need to make sure that we're working with our partners and allies so that they will join with us when we and help using all source intelligence to identify bad actors in cyberspace, but then also work with us to impose costs.
Congressman, I find it interesting when I look back in history. So my research projects go back into the early roots of hacking, and I even remember early in my career, we worked with Secret Service largely on computer crimes, and they were responsible in the late 80s, early 90s for some of the investigations. It strikes me that today that pretty much every law enforcement arm of the federal government and even to the state level has a cybersecurity function. Is that true?
That's true. And it depends whether it might be Secret Service, might be FBI. I know in Rhode Island we have the Rhode Island State Police, the Joint Cyber Task Force here in Rhode Island State Police. They have an entity there. On the international front, by the way, getting back to your other point, we just heard testimony yesterday about the cyber assistant legal attaches that are the eyes and ears of the FBI in country overseas. So there's so many entities now that are involved on the law enforcement side that are trying to go after cyber criminals, and it's a continued work in progress as it evolves, and no shortage of challenges.
Congressman, what can we do as experts in cybersecurity to help any law enforcement agency? For those of us listening, especially. Yeah.
So first of all, I think it's so important that we reach out to the cybersecurity researcher community and accept the help that so many people want to offer. I've been out now to DEF CON a couple of times, and always impressed, obviously, with the size of the conference. But I learned early on that there's a lot of good people that just want the internet to work right. They just want someone to listen, and so there's any number of ways that people can get involved. I was a big fan, of course, in the early days of the Hack the Pentagon program that Ash Carter put together. Now we have other areas of government that are there's the Hack the Capitol event that just went on. I just spoke to that recently. There's a whole number of ways that cybersecurity researchers can get involved and helping to basically both protect the ecosystem but protect our country.
Do you think Congress is starting to catch up? I know the first few times I talked with you quite a while ago, I at least felt like that the Congress was not, with some exceptions like yourself, there was not a lot of movement forward with the government on understanding these kind of problems, and it was very esoteric to them. Do you think we've reached that tipping point where now we're starting to see people really understand, they get it, they're starting to say this is very important, we need to do something?
Yes, it's changed a lot since I first got involved in this issue back in 2007 or 2008. I kind of got a lot of funny looks when I talked about the threats of cybersecurity to the country, and people just didn't get it. But now they do, and it's there's a number of things that I've been working on over the years, but unfortunately, the reason why people are so aware of the problem now is because of the high-profile cyber attacks or intrusions that have occurred, including people getting their the PII caught up in some of these cyber intrusions that have stolen personal and private information, or the damage that it's done to our economy because of the theft of intellectual property. So more and more people are aware of the problem. I don't necessarily know that everybody gets what to do about it. and that's something that where people are learning more and more about. But I try to remind everyone that there is no silver bullet. We're never going to get to a day where we're 100% cyber secure. What we can do, though, is we can buy down our risk to something that is much more manageable than it is today. Starts with good cyber hygiene, of course. So many of the problems in cybersecurity could be avoided if people didn't click on the malicious links, or they had the strong passwords. They use two-factor authentication and those types of things. So we just have to get to a place where we're educating people, starting at the very youngest ages. The Israelis are great at this. It's really it's immersed in their whole system from K through 12 education about cybersecurity. We need to do that same thing here in the United States.
Congressman, are there discussions happening about international regulations about, for lack of a better term, cyber weapons? In other words, I could develop an exploit. I can sell that basically to whoever I want, enemy nation state or not. Are there discussions happening today on how to regulate cyber weapons similar to how we regulate other types of weapons?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I haven't really heard it put that way, but it's going to be hard to do that. I don't know that I have an easy answer for it right now, but especially when it's something that's dual use technology or dual use program, it can be very difficult. What I will say is that, and that's one of the findings of the Cyberspace Solarium Commission, that we need to make sure that we're changing the calculus now, the dynamic of the rush to be first to market as opposed to be secure to market. So for example, the liability on final goods assemblers, by way of example, that we have to have more accountability in my view, and that's one of the findings of the Solarium Commission. We need to have a list of what's in a product, if you will, so that we know where vulnerabilities might exist. So, but I would say it's going to be an ongoing discussion to see what is appropriate for regulation, what might be appropriate for legislation, and then what's right for collaboration with private sector. And I prefer to go down the road of collaboration rather than necessarily always imposing requirements.
All right.
So the concept of the cyber weapon, wanted to sort of ask your thoughts, your opinion on some government agencies such as the FBI and some others recently, with that Quoddy fingers hacking back, some entity hacking us or appearing or attempting to hack us, so we go in and hack them because they are vulnerable. What are your thoughts on some of those types of activities?
So I don't support hacking back absent government involvement, and I don't support private entities, if that's the question, going in and hacking back. Although it's tempting, and I'm sure there's lots of people that would like to say, well, we'll show you. We think your cyber tools are strong, ours are stronger, but you don't know what unintended consequences that may set off a cascade of reactions that you can't control. And in a country like North Korea or Iran, for example, if there's a hackback that took place from the private sector, they're not going to distinguish between it coming from the private sector or that government was behind it. They're just going to know that somebody from the United States attacked them, and they're going to assume that it probably came from the government. So if there's going to be a hackback situation, it really needs to be the government that does the hacking back, so that we're ready for the blowback and can use all tools of national power to protect us from that. But I will say, if you're talking about the action that the FBI recently took with respect to hacking back against unpatched servers, if that's your question.
Yes, sir.
The FBI conducted a seizure pursuant to a warrant. And as you know, lots of people were affected by web shells that had created because they didn't patch. It doesn't seem to have caused significant harm, but it was an innovative way, a different way that FBI has acted that they had in the past, and it helped to neutralize the threat. Going forward, I think we have to figure out, is that the role of the FBI, or is that something that, say, Department of Homeland Security could carry out?
I think the important point there, Congressman, is acting underneath a warrant, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that in the private sector example you gave, you're not acting under a warrant, right? And I think that's a major differentiator.
That's right. It is.
Do you see more of that kind of thing going forward? I thought that was a very interesting story when I saw. I thought it was innovative. I thought it was a good use of resources to try and fix and patch some of these servers sort of by force, since nobody would do it. Do you think that's going to be more of a thing that you see the FBI or CISA or whomever going out and doing?
It might be, and certainly it might even be better or more effective to the for the ISPs to do it. But I would certainly like to see us being more proactive at closing all vulnerabilities. And by the way, I will say that we have the vulnerabilities equity process in the government, and that's really important because that's where they weigh what needs to be disclosed and patched, and what they may not for national security purposes may hold back on. Now, there's always the lean toward disclosure, and I've been on that for a while, and I'm impressed by the way the vulnerabilities equity process works. It's a balance, but I think it's a good process that's put in place. But I guess I'll just pause there.
Okay. Do you see on those same lines? Do you see then like a shift away from kinetic warfare funding, maybe off into virtual warfare? I mean, even if they're not hacking back, they have to kind of be ready to do that, because I think there's going to be more of that going forward, where these attacks are not necessarily going to be kinetic. There will be a need for that.
Yeah. So. There's always going to be that balance, and I would say that we need to do several things. And that's one of the findings of the Solarium Commission. I should mention, by the way, that our strategy that we came up with was one of basically 3 parts: shape behavior, deny benefits, and impose costs. Those are the 3 major principles of our final report. And so, in some ways, we're going to develop tools that where we would impose costs, but we also need to work hard to deny benefits if the bad guys do get in. This challenge is not going to go away anytime soon, and we need to figure out a better strategy for protecting the country in cyberspace. We do it by working with our partners, using international norms, shape, and behavior. Assume that the bad guys per se are going to get in, but we want to limit their ability to do damage, and we do that by denying benefits. Think of the OPM hack that occurred. There's an entity. Obviously, they didn't understand, that organization didn't understand the value of the data they were charged with protecting. And they were trying to defend old antiquated IT system, antiquated IT system, and the data wasn't encrypted, so it got stolen, and presumably China took a treasure trove of information. Had that information been encrypted, it would have been rendered for the most part useless. And then we have to understand the issue of imposing costs. That's why it's not just say about cyber on cyber. And by the way, I should say that we are going to see more of this gray zone conflict going on, right? That is just below the threshold of armed conflict. And so we need to understand that, be prepared for it, and figure out how to deal with it. And we do that by pushing back in some ways, again, denying benefits, but certainly times we'll be imposing costs. But it's not, we don't think of it just, we don't have to think about it just in terms of cyber on cyber. We can use all assets of national power to respond and impose costs, whether it's sanctions, indictments, law enforcement actions, or again, working with our partners on the international front to impose costs.
It sounds like, Congressman, that defense is really a key part of the strategy for our nation, ensuring that our infrastructure, our software and hardware is more secure that we use here in the U.S. To that end, what are your thoughts on IoT or industrial IoT devices and either regulation, legislation on when you bring a product to market, it has to meet a minimum standard of security for home routers, cameras, and all of these different devices that are being produced at a rapid rate?
And specifically, Paul, I was just looking that up, the IoT Cybersecurity Improvement Act of 2020.
Yes.
So,
yeah. And so, as I said earlier, I think there is too much right now of a rush to market as opposed to secure to market. And we really need to change that dynamic. So that's why, having liability there for final goods assemblers, you think of it in terms of, someone sells you a car, there's liability there. Now, by the way, when I say that, there's liability, it doesn't necessarily mean that there has to be a patch if there's a vulnerability. It just means that somebody has to weigh the equities there, and could it cause damage? Could it cause significant harm if the vulnerability was exploited? And somebody has to take responsibility for that. So that's really important. So and also the other thing that we're trying to do is making sure that we're using the purchasing power of the government as a market driver for more security. You won't be able to sell to the government, for example, if it's not more secure. That's the hope is that those standards will also apply more broadly to the private sector.
Larry, sorry, did you have a
no, I'm hoping that's the case, and Paul, we've talked, and the other guests, the other hosts rather, have talked about this a lot. That this may be the time that we need to see lots more legislation to help make this go further and be stronger about what we're seeing for the security for IoT. We think about that risk metric for the automobile manufacturers, and we go back to the movie Fight Club, where the automobile manufacturers find an issue with the car, and how much is it going to cost to fix versus what does it cost to pay out all of those folks that could potentially be hurt. But we think about what the cost of an IoT device is, and usually they're pretty inexpensive, and compared to what it takes the development time to fix a problem versus what the potential damage could be, and the potential damage is staggering, even for something quite small. So I'm hoping that we see more of this. I think
that's a great segue, Larry, into supply chain security, which came under great scrutiny after the SolarWinds breach. Congressman, was there an executive order? What was the action by the federal government in response to that?
Yeah, so there were sanctions on Russia as a result, and there may be more coming down the pike. We have the ability to respond at a time and place of our choosing. But going forward, entities should be on notice that we're not going to sit idly by, and if you're going to engage in malicious action against us, that there are also consequences.
Mm. Are there also concerns about most of the hardware that we use coming from China, and that being part of the supply chain? I know that's a topic we talk a lot about here on the show, is that we do import a lot of the computer hardware.
Yeah. So, and that's just it. Supply chain security is a big deal, something that I'm paying a lot of attention to on my subcommittee on the Armed Services Committee. We are, dependent on a lot of components that are made outside the United States, and security is always going to be a challenge. For those, exquisite systems, certain types of chips, for example, we need to make sure that we make them ourselves, whether it's the government or the private sector that where we order it from. In other cases, we have to make sure that where we're getting our critical supplies, that we know where it's coming from, and we know it's secure. So that's what it's going to be a top priority going forward. So
one of the go ahead, Doug.
Is that so? I've seen this SBOM, software bill of materials stuff being sort of tossed about. Do you think that that's viable? That we can require products? I know that they were starting to require it for federal, but is that? I mean, do you think that's viable to require? I would like to see it, but I don't know if it'll work.
I do. I think that, first of all, we can require it, and it's starting to move in that direction. In some ways, the DoD does it, and we're going to be doing it more broadly in government. But that the software, the bill of materials to know what's in the software, it's going to have to at least be known, so that we know if there's a problem, we know where to look and how to address it. And I hope that spills over into benefiting the private sector as well.
Was that an executive order? Was that where that came from, that requirement? I remember I did a news story about it, but I'm trying to remember how it was coming out.
Well, I know that NTIA is doing great work, and they're proving it out right now.
Yeah,
but it's probably going to be coming out in the executive order right now.
Yeah, I think it just hadn't maybe gotten place yet, but there was a news story about that the other day. It was a response to SolarWinds that they wanted this software bill of materials, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, we're hoping that's going to be in the executive order. I'm hearing that we'll have something to that effect in there.
Congressman, one of the other issues that I think we face as a nation is increasing our cybersecurity talent. What efforts are you aware of going on now to increase the cybersecurity talent here in the U.S.?
Yeah, couldn't agree more. We need more people going into the cybersecurity field. I applaud and appreciate the work that Doug is doing on the academic side. We also have the Cyber Core program, and that was one of the findings of the Sullivan Commission, that we wanted to grow the Cyber Core program significantly. I know many of you are familiar with it, but it's Cyber Core is a scholarship for service program. You can be accepted as a junior and senior in college, and your tuition will be paid for your junior and senior year. You get a stipend of $22,500, and when you graduate, you go into some type of government cybersecurity work at the local, state, or federal level for a period of 2 years to help pay back your scholarship for service that you're accepted into. And so government can't just compete for more cyber talent to grow its share of the piece of the pie. We need to grow the whole pie itself, so it benefits both government and the private sector. So again, big shout out to Doug White for what he's doing. He's been a pioneer here in educating the next generation in cybersecurity, and we need to continue to grow that effort, including, by the way, educating kids at the youngest levels, K through 12, as I mentioned earlier. So both instilling cybersecurity awareness, but also doing things like teaching coding and secure coding at very young ages, and so that all this is kind of baked in from when they're very young.
Agreed. Doug, did you have more questions, topics?
The only other question I was kind of in a different light, but I know there's a lot of pressure to roll out broadband to everyone, because I think if we don't do that, people are going to be left behind. I don't really it's very tough for me to even conceptualize how people's kids and whatever do things in school if they don't have access to some kind of broadband. But I was wondering, are we doing things as we talk about that to also push cyber hygiene, cyber knowledge down to the same people who are getting this broadband so that they don't become the next generation of victims of all this fraud and crime that's going on?
Well, we need to do more of that, of course. And now the broadband side, very pleased that the president's Americans Jobs Plan is going to put money into broadband, so more IT infrastructure. But it really has to be part of an IT infrastructure package going forth, and cyber needs to be a primary concern for any future government spending.
Yeah, I mean, I get a lot of calls from people, police officers, towns, and things, just saying, we don't know what to do. We got people calling us, our constituents are calling us. So it's sort of, I'm glad they're rolling out broadband, but it also creates a whole new avenue of problems for with people being exposed to this stuff.
Yeah. The other thing I'll mention too is that we also, going back to security of industrial control systems, we need to make sure that we're properly training the installers on a lot of the equipment as well. I know it's a little bit unrelated to what we were just talking about, but I wanted to mention that something I meant to mention earlier, that not only do we need to have stronger security for operational control systems, but we also need to make sure that the operators that are installing this stuff are well versed in security. Just in the way that an electrician is steeped in safety training right from the get-go. If you don't, you touch the wrong hot wire and you're dead. Well, we need to make sure that we're also steeping security in mind for those installers as well.
Oh,
I completely agree.
So we, between the congressman and Dr. Doug, we've kind of got Rhode Island nailed. How do we get the other 49?
Well, it's I've got some great partners, first of all, in cybersecurity, and I was very pleased years ago when I first got into this to start the Cybersecurity Caucus with my colleague and friend Mike McCall, a Republican colleague from Texas. I got Congressman Mike Gallagher, who I serve with on the Armed Services Committee, and he and I serve on the Solarium Commission together. He was one of the co-chairs, along with Angus King, our two great co-chairs. Dutch Ruppersberger from the great state of Maryland. He's on the Appropriations Committee. He's got NSA in his district, and he's another cyber warrior and champion. And so the list is growing, but it's a work in progress. I would like to eventually see, and it's one of the findings of the Solarium Commission, that we create a cybersecurity committee, a select committee on cybersecurity in Congress. That way you get members that really develop the expertise, and you streamline the jurisdictional fights or issues that you have, because right now there's some 80 different committees and subcommittees that have jurisdiction over cybersecurity in some way, shape, or form. It's just too many. You can't do proper oversight that way. So eventually, I think we're going to need a select committee on cybersecurity. It's just too big, and so we need to let members know that cybersecurity is a big deal in every congressional district in the country. That's another area. So, when you asked earlier, what can the cybersecurity researcher community do? What can people that are interested in this topic do? Get to know your members and their staff, and you can serve as a resource to them. Never underestimate the amazing talent that you have, that the government also needs, just in terms of education awareness. And not every member is going to care about cybersecurity, but you can help the member and their staff to understand the challenges, or be a resource to answer the tough questions for them.
So, following on, any tough nuts to crack that are frustrating that we haven't asked you about?
Well, there's never a shortage of issues and things that we could talk about. I was very proud of the work that we did on Solarium. 80 recommendations. And the fact that we got 27 of them, of the 55 legislative proposals through in Congress, is just great. And the one thing that that had been missing this whole time, again, for 10 years, I've been raising the awareness on this, that we didn't have a quarterback on the field. And we know it was the point person for the government really pulling all this together. We had, the closest we had is the cybersecurity advisor in the White House, but didn't have any policy or budgetary authority. We needed someone that had a position as the bite, if you will, that has the authorities to compel departments and agencies to close their vulnerabilities and do more in cybersecurity. We now finally have that person. The last year, the National Defense Authorization Act, one of the findings, that one of the proposals we were able to get through is creating a Senate-confirmed National Cyber Director. And I want to give a big shout out to Chris Inglis as the first ever National Cyber Director to be nominated. He's awaiting confirmation right now. Chris was my pick for cyber, the first ever cyber director. He's a thought leader on cybersecurity, former deputy director of the NSA, and so I'm excited about the talent that he's going to bring to this new administration. Big shout out to President Biden too. He really gets this. He's doing more on cyber. I was just with Vice President Kamala Harris yesterday. She was in Rhode Island, and she and I had a side chat. And I said, I understand that you're going to be taking the point on cybersecurity, and she said yes. She's been working on it for years and years now, back to when she was Attorney General in California. And so we pledged to work together. Her office has already reached out to my office, and we're going to get some things going. But and also the administration created the Ann Neuberger's position, the Deputy National Security Advisor for Cyber. So, and you've got Jen Easterly, who's going to be the new director of CISA. So we're getting the right people in place with the right authorities, and now we're just going to continue to keep the oars moving in the right direction. But we're getting there. I'm excited about the future for better protecting the country in cyberspace. I'm always honored to do my part.
Congressman, thank you so much for all of your work, especially that in cyber. It's near and dear to our hearts here in the show and our listeners. So thank you for coming on the show tonight.
Thanks so much. Great to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. And next up is the security news. Make sure you stay tuned.